All right, welcome back to Critical Wade Theory. And if this is your first time, well, welcome here for the first time then. And today I'm looking at a music video that's easy to underestimate at first glance, but quietly does something really effective. That's right, I'm talking about UB40's 1983 version of Red Red Wine. Now, as far as like my history with the song goes, like I've heard it many times, in my life, just sort of randomly here and there. And I've got a little bit of a missed opportunity connection with this song. Well, with not the song necessarily, but with UB40 itself. At one point, I actually had possibly a chance to interview members of UB40, but I guess they were too busy or something, so it was not meant to be. But I can say that, I almost got to interview them. And if you look at this podcast and take kind of a deep dive, you'll see I've interviewed people who are in the music industry or movies and TV shows and, you know, that sort of thing. uh, Alter Bridge, I did an interview with Miles Kennedy, the lead singer and one of the main guitarists in that band. I've interviewed, like Neil deGrasse Tyson. I've interviewed him before, but UB40 is one of those ones who just got away. You know what I mean? But anyway, enough of me tooting my own horn over here. But let's get into the song. Most people know the song, if they've listened to enough pop radio. It's smooth, it's laid back, almost hypnotic in a way, and that's one of the things that kind of draws me into it when I hear it. It's one of those songs that, in my opinion, it's just kind of hard to hate it. I'd have a hard time trying to hate this one because it's just a likable tune, I think. And the video tells a slightly different story, though. It's a simple video, and you might say it's basic in a way. And UB40 released Red Red Wine in 1983 when I was about 1.5 years old, and it was part of their album Labor of Love, a record made entirely of reggae covers. And the song itself was originally written and recorded by Neil Diamond back in the 1960s, but UB40 didn't even realize that at first, which is kind of funny. They thought they were actually covering a reggae version that was created by Tony Tribe. So it's almost like they accidentally insulted Neil Diamond with that little story of theirs. But, I mean, sometimes that's how things work. You don't really hear the original and you hear a cover version, and then you think, oh, that's like that's surely the best version of the song or something like that. And sometimes you don't even hear the original. Like another example of that, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, but just for a comparison, some people probably actually think that Johnny Cash wrote Hurt and that, you know, they don't even know it was a Nine Inch Nails song originally. I'm sure most people, if they know music, they know that that's a cover song. But it's a similar premise here. Some people probably think that this was like a UB40 original. It happens sometimes if people aren't that knowledgeable about who wrote an actual hit, then they're going to end up misattributing the writing credits to it and stuff like that. But the uh, the approach here, they weren't trying to reinvent a classic pop song. They were working inside a reggae tradition in a way, and that shows up clearly in the sound. It doesn't really sound like a Neil Diamond song or whatever. It sounds more like whatever the Tony Tribe song must sound like. Admittedly, I haven't heard that one myself, and maybe I should look into that, I suppose. But the rhythm here is slow. It's a warm song, and I'm pretty sure that it's more relaxed sounding than the original. I mean, it is actually kind of harder to even sound more relaxed than this version of Red Red Wine. It's a very easygoing sort of song. And Ali Campbell's vocals are smooth, maybe a little bit detached sounding even, and it gives the song a kind of emotional distance. It sounds calm on the surface, but underneath it's actually about heartbreak and coping by drinking. So it's actually, a little bit of a tear in my beer kind of song, only without the country vibe to it. And that contrast becomes even more interesting when you look at the video. It's not really like a bleak music video, but there are like undertones of maybe like slight sadness or something like that, or somebody trying to hide their sadness, like maybe they're actually way more sad than they appear on the surface. And I think that vibe is actually a little bit depicted successfully in the video. So the video was actually directed by Bernard Rose, who also directed the movie Candyman, the original horror classic starring Tony Todd. So that's a little bit of trivia right here. A lot of people probably would not assume that, this video was directed by the same guy who made Candyman, but it's true. And the video takes a very grounded approach. It's mostly shot in black and white. There are no flashy effects, no big stage performance. Instead, it's set in a real pub in Birmingham and focuses on everyday people. And you see workers, locals, regulars. They're not actors, or at least I don't think they are. And it gives the whole thing a more documentary feel. It makes it feel real. And UB40 themselves came out of working class Birmingham, and the video, it sort of conveys that identity instead of trying to polish it up for MTV. And that's where the story comes in. It's not just a performance clip, it's something that actually follows a nice and simple narrative. Ollie Campbell plays the central character. He's in the pub, dealing with heartbreak, drinking more and more as the song goes on, and the mood is quiet, almost heavy. There's no real drama in the traditional sense, but it's just like a slow unraveling. And, it plays with the audience a little bit because, like I said, it's like the sadness is there, but it doesn't beat you over the head with it. So I can appreciate sometimes subtle messaging instead of like constantly, well, beating people over the head with things. And I think that's sort of a lost art in a lot of things. I think a lot of people want to make things dramatic, but you don't always need to do that. And I think this music video is actually in some ways more compelling for being relatively subtle. And by the end, he's clearly had too much and he has to be taken home. And that's it. That's really the story. But in my opinion, kind of effective. It works because it directly mirrors the lyrics. And the idea of using alcohol to numb emotional pain isn't romanticized here. It's shown as something ordinary and a little bit sad. You kind of feel sorry for the character, and the music is still mellow and all that, but it's also something that conveys a slight hint of darkness, which I kind of like. I'm not saying it's like, I don't know, like that gloomy or whatever, but it's a little bit sad. And what's really interesting is that there's a contrast between the sound and the visuals. The music feels warm and relaxed. You can play it at a party, a wedding, a bar, and certainly people do. It's become one of those songs that lives in social spaces, and you'll probably hear it on the radio still every so often. But the video strips that feeling back a little bit. It shows the reality behind the mood, the why behind the drinking. And that tension is where the video succeeds. It doesn't fight the song, but it adds another layer to it. And there are also a few details worth noting aside from that. The version in this video doesn't include the rap or toast section that was added to the later 1988 US release version, the one that really helped push the song to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. So that's kind of an interesting fact, because this version it's it's more I don't know, it's more laid back because of that, I guess, because of what it's missing. Like that part of the song, I mean, it's memorable, but this version it's less like it's showing off or whatever. It's just it's more simple, I guess. And I do like that rap part, but it to be honest, it kind of seems like it's unnecessary. I'm sure that's a controversial thing to say, and all that. But I think I'm gonna stand by that. It's not like I hate that part. Like I said, I like it. But when it comes to this song, it it, it doesn't really need anything extra to it, to be honest. So what you're seeing here is the original concept, which is simpler, a little more restrained, and in a way more in line with the early 1980s UK music videos, which were often more story driven and less focused on extras. So compared to a lot of what MTV would become known for, this video has that low budget vibe, but it's very intentional. There's no glamour, no escape, just a pub, a few drinks, and a guy trying to deal with something he can't quite shake. And maybe that's why this video has lasted in some people's memories. UB40's version of Red Red Wine ended up becoming more widely recognized than the original for most listeners. It topped charts, sold over 1 million copies in the UK, and eventually hit number 1 in the US years later. Even Neil Diamond himself said it's one of his favorite covers of his work, and he often performs it using a style that's more in line with UB40's reggae arrangement than his original version. And that's not just a successful cover, in other words, that's like a full reinterpretation that stuck. Because even Neil Diamond's like, you know what? This version kind of captured more magic than even my original version had. And I'm the one who wrote it. That's probably what was going on in his mind. And that's not the only example of that. So, I mean, you've got like I mentioned, there's the Johnny Cash version of Hurt, but other versions like that. There's the Jimi Hendrix cover of All Around the Watchtower. You know, Bob Dylan has actually covered that song basically in a way that's similar to how Hendrix played it than what he originally did. So, this is sort of a pattern that has been established in, some popular music. If if an artist is well attuned to being objective and being wise and being fair-minded and not, being too jealous or angry about other people covering the work, they can sometimes, even admit, hey, this version's actually better than how I did it. And I think that's awesome when that happens. That to me shows somebody who actually has class and who can recognize talent. And those are good traits to have. So, you know, I give credit to Neil Diamond here for, being a good sport about this. Just like I give credit to Bob Dylan for acknowledging that Hendrix did a great job with one of his songs and all that. So when you go back and watch the video, it's worth paying attention to how simple it is, because like I said, sometimes simple or simplicity is like where it's at. It's not doing something over the top. It's still a deliberate kind of video. It takes a song that feels easy and comforting and quietly reminds you what it's actually about. And I think that can be a lost art. So there are times when you need to turn the subtlety knob up a little bit, you know, crank that one up a little bit rather than the, the over the top knob. But anyway, that's it for this episode. I'm at risk of repeating myself too many damn times. So I'm sure in the future I'll look at other videos that say more than they seem to say on the surface. I'm not sure what my next music video review will be, but I've got some on the back burner. But anyway, thanks for listening, and don't be too shy to click the like or subscribe button or whatever you have there that you can click on, maybe leave a message, and it's good for Al Gore's rhythm. But anyway, that was a corny joke, and I'm going to end on that. Have a good one.